So with that said, we'll go ahead and get started. I do want to thank everyone for joining me here on this Saturday. This will be a fairly quick box, so feel free to hang out afterwards to talk if you're hacking along. Awesome. Feel free to unmute your mic and ask questions while I go through this walkthrough. Again, I'll do my best to try and pay attention to the chat. So ask some questions there if you can. And I'll try and get to them. If not, we can circle back after the talk. So I am sharing my screen. Can everybody see? We should be looking at the SBWASP meetup page for this boot to root walkthrough. Sumo, cool. So yeah, so this is number 3 out of I don't even know how many I'll end up doing. I have I think six ready for you guys, so more to come. This is what we would consider a boot to root, which means that there typically aren't flags along the way. It usually is basically you are trying to gain access to the box and then gain some sort of root privilege. And then there usually is a final flag, if you will, that basically is congratulating you for getting root. But really that's the key difference between the two more popular versions of these types of capture the flags, if you will. There's capture the flag is typically like there's multiple flags and you're getting them along the way. Same kind of commonality and goal is at the end of the day, we're trying to still get root. But you just may find flags along the way. Where a boot to root, there's usually not like a trail of flags getting you to root. It's usually just get root however you can, and then there's maybe happens to be a root flag. So this is a boot to root. So we essentially have our Kali instance up, and in my hypervisor of choice, I do have Sumo spun up and running. For those of you who are new, you may have fired this thing up and you're presented with a login and you're just like, okay, now what do I do? Where's the login? What's the, well, that's the whole thing. We don't have a login. We don't even have an IP address. So we got to start somewhere. But again, the goal of these are you don't really interact with, and apologies if this is reviews for some of you, but we don't really interact with the actual box that we spun up in this manner. Again, this is thought of as this is our target. In make-believe land, this exists somewhere else. We don't have access to the actual terminal login. We just do because we're using this in our hypervisor and we're the ones running it. But in the real world, you wouldn't typically be able to just see the login prompt of your your target. Not right away anyway. So once you fire this up, you pretty much just set it and forget it, right? This is just a target. We're going to try and figure out where the target is. Yes, we know because we spun it up on our VM, but as a normal attacker, you may not actually know where your target is out of the vast network that you may be on. And plus, it's just good to sort of get in the habit of going through certain stages of recon. But nonetheless, so this is Sumo. I believe this was done for a school a few years back. It is on VulnHub. Here's the link to the actual entry, which gives you some information about it. I did paste some of the information here on the meetup. It does say it's beginner. I would agree with this, but again, your mileage may vary. If you've never done one of these before, this will probably be like the hardest thing you've ever done when it comes to hacking. But if you have some experience, I think that you would agree that this is fairly straightforward and fairly simple. The tools that I used, CTF toolkit, this kind of helps me stay on track. Nmap, as always, that's pretty much always going to be pretty much the first thing we're almost always going to do. Nikto, and I'll kind of explain some of these things as I go over them. But these are the things that I directly used. Again, your mileage may vary. There may be a few different ways you may have been able to get root on this box. This was just, these are the final sort of tools, if you will, that I ended up using to get root on these. And again, I'll go over these as I'm using them. So again, I'm using Kali. And the first thing we want to do in our Kali box is we have to make sure that our Kali instance is on the same network or subnet as our target. If they're not, you will probably never find it, and you will probably never be able to hack it. So I run mine in NAT. I'm running my target in NAT, and I'm running my Kali instance in NAT. A real quick reason why is because if it's bridged, they're going to end up they're going to grab an IP on my same public like home network. So that means that as I'm trying to search for the target, I'm going to also be finding everything else in my home, which for you may be a few things, for me is a lot of things. If you run them in NAT, the only things that will show up are the only other things running in NAT. For me, that's nothing. So I should only see two boxes, my own Kali box. I'll see the target, and then I might see like the VMware, host controller an interface or something like that. So again, that's just what I do. Again, feel free, whatever works for you, stick with it. But that's just typically how I set up my VMs, is to run in that mode, because I don't have anything else on my network running in that. So the first thing I want to do is to find out my own IP address, the IP address of my Kali box, right? We don't want to get that mixed up. And for certain types of attacks, you may be phoning home to yourself, so it's good to know. Plus, we need to know ourselves so that when we get our list, we know we can exclude ourselves, then we're left with our target. So I know that this is my Kali address. Now I need to find the address of the Sumo box that we're going to hack. So real quick, to sort of kick things off, I'll be leveraging the CTF toolkit again as sort of a guide. I really want you guys to use this, tell your friends. I think it will help, and not only in the step or order of things that you should do, but also in some of the things and the tools that you should, or you could try during said step. Most engagements you can kind of crudely break them down into three categories: enumeration, which is like recon. You have to find out like what is your target, what is everything you know about the target, what ports are open, what services are running. All that stuff is enumeration or recon. And then we can leverage that to try and do some sort of exploit, because maybe we found something, we found an old version of something, and we're going to exploit that. Now that that's exploited, we'll typically go to post exploitation. That's part of like privesc or privilege escalation. How do we get root? How do we move around the box? How do we get off this box onto another box? So these are the sort of, again, in a crude manner of breaking them down, the three categories or steps that one would do in an engagement in a pen test, or just even just hack the boxes or vulnerable boxes. These are typically the three sort of categories you should be thinking in. Obviously, there's a lot more to it than that, but in its simplest form, this is kind of what we talk about. And then in each of these, we have, again, the things that are associated with that category of enumeration. These are enumeration tools. Again, like anything, a tool is a tool, has a specific use. Some are more common than others. Some may get you more information than others, but nonetheless, there's a million of them out there for enumeration. But these are very common ones that I find on a pen test, or even just in a vuln box or a hack the box or any CTF. You'll find that certain enumeration tools you'll find yourself using over and over again. Again, when we come to exploits, there's a million of them out there, but it kind of, you can kind of make it down or boil it down to just a handful. And again, this is by no means like a complete list. This is just what I consider like the bare minimum, if you will, list of things like that. And again, like post exploits, which we're going to be using, not all of these, but we're going to be using at least one or two from each category. So again, to stay organized, again, we know kind of what we're doing, right? We know we need to do enumeration. I know I need to do some exploits. I know I need to do some privesc or post exploits. And I know I need a root flag. So I'm just going to kind of put these here just to kind of keep on track. I did make some kind of new modifications to this guy. So we have input target, which I'll show you guys, which is pretty awesome. And I did add a ROT13 cipher. So for those of you who are doing any type of encryption, decryption, these are the three that I have so far. Probably one of the more common ones. There's a ton out there. There's other places to go that have a lot more of these types of encryptions, but nonetheless, here at least a few common ones. So yeah, so we'll kind of kick things off with enumeration. So I know what my IP address is, and now again I need to know what the target IP address is. So now I got to try and figure out, well, what is the target IP address of the box that I'm trying to hack? So the first thing we'll probably do is grab, we'll run an Nmap scan first of the whole entire my NAT network, and then we'll try and figure out, like, once we have that, then we'll do some more digging. So I'm going to leverage this this SN flag, which basically says host discover only, and it's going to tell me, it's not going to do any port scans. It's not going to tell me what ports are open. It's just going to scan my network to tell me what targets, what boxes exist on that network. Now, the cool thing that I implemented with this target is I can enter in an IP address and it will populate as I kind of go along. So I know mine is 192.168.159.130, which is cool. But I want to scan just the 159 subnet. So for now, I'll just copy this. But I'm going to make a slight modifications here. So I am going to, in Nmap, I'm going to paste this, but I don't want to this is my box. I already know my box is open. I want to scan the /24 of my network to find out what other boxes are on this subnet, on this 159. So I'm going to run that, and it's going to come back fairly quickly with the things that are open. So we talked before, this is me. I clearly can tell this is probably, again, like the interface or whatever for the NAT in my VM Workstation hypervisor that's maybe assigning addresses, or the gateway. This is the target machine. So this IP address is the address for this box. And I know that because these are the only two things running in my VM, and they're the only two things running in NAT, which means that they're the only two things that are going to have this, that are going to be on this 159 subnet. So now that I know what my target is, I'll come back here and just change this to the 2. And as you know, as you type, all these fill in. So now on any page where you may copy and paste it, that sort of makes sense for it to have an IP address, it will auto-populate for you. So again, just making your life easier as you go through these things. Sure, it's nice to be able to type them out by memory, but sometimes you're just kind of cruising along, or there's just a million different things that you just don't have enough room in your head to memorize all of these things. But at least you can get a comment, like at least a good idea of like what they do, a little bit of a description, the flags. And then a few, ones that I think are that yield pretty good results. Again, this is by no means a list. You want an extensive list, go to the bottom and go there and read all about the different 1,000 flags or arguments that you can put into Nmap. But majority of the time, these are probably like 2 or 3 that you'll probably find yourself using over and over and over again. So now we have our target. And again, we put it over here. So now we need to find out what ports and what services are running, because ports are important, but services are sometimes even more important, because sure, a port, you might say like, okay, it's port 80, so I know there's a web server, but maybe it'd be nice to know, well, what's the web server? Is it Apache? Is it Nginx? Or not only that, or maybe what is the actual version? Is it an older version? Is it a newer version? And as you do this recon and the enumeration, you start to get more and more information about your target. And then that gives you what I was mentioning to earlier about the doors, the paths, the options, the forks in the roads to go down. Not only does it show a port, there's a million things you can do. Maybe you start narrowing some things down. Okay, but I know this service is running on that port, and I know this actual version number of the service is running on that port. So the more recon you can do, the easier it will probably point you in the direction of what to do. So I'm going to run this one, which is essentially is running in verbose mode. So I'm going to see sort of things in real time that Nmap is doing. I'm going to find some information about the service, about the OS. Most importantly is this flag here, the -p-. I will always mention it because a lot of people forget it. If you don't put the -p-, you will not run a sweep of all 63 or 65,000, I forget the exact number, ports that exist. And if this author of this box happened to put the entryway on a higher port, you would never know because you didn't scan for it. So the -p is extremely important to make sure you put, and that essentially tells Nmap scan all the ports, not just out of the gate. By default, I think it's like 1,000 or whatever. So if it's a port, it's like 1,001. You're screwed. It won't find it because you haven't told it to look. So we can see here we got back some information. I see 2 ports open. Again, a default scan will probably just tell you the port, and that's it. It may not tell you the service, and it definitely wouldn't tell you like the actual version. So the more information we get, the better our chances of trying to figure out a way into this box. Because remember, like technically we don't have a way in. Like sure, we fired up on our VM, but we don't have a login. We have nothing, and so far we're just trying to figure out like what is running on the thing. We have literally no idea what Sumo is, what's running, what it's doing. We know nothing. That's the step one. Stage one is that recon or enumeration. So we know 2 ports are open, 22, typically SSH. That's usually how we get into a Linux box. So we're probably pretty sure it's probably Linux. It's telling us here, some information about it. We see port 80 open. That's a good indication if there's a HTTP service. And it's also telling us Apache. Most likely there's a web server running, shocking. But as you do these, you'll find that it's fairly common to see some sort of web service running. And that's usually a way we're going to get into these, and this is no exception. So now that we know that there's 2 ports open, and again, I'm not going to go into too much detail about all the hundreds of different things we could try on port 22 to gain access to it. We're going to stick to what the boiled down version of getting root onto this box, the straight to the kind of cut to the chase, if you will. So whenever we see a web port open, it's very beneficial for us to probably go visit that just to see what may exist over there. Like what is in fact, do we see a web page? Is there, maybe there's a hint there, maybe it's a website, maybe it's nothing, we don't know, but we should probably go there. So again, sorry, I can't walk and chew gum at the same time. We can just type in our target IP address, and if there's a web server running, we should at least maybe see something. And sure enough, we do. We see that this page works. This is the default page for this server. It's running, but no content has been added yet. So even with this, at least we know, yes, there is a web server. This apparently has just been spun up. Again, I'm just hypothetically speaking. There's no content here. There's a ton of stuff we can already do just with getting this. We can start looking at the page source. There's a lot of things we can start doing. But again, to sort of keep this down to the narrative, if you will, we know that 2 ports are open. We're going to focus on one of them. We're going to focus on port 80. We just confirmed that there is a web server running. This tells you most likely what the server is, Apache. And we confirm by going there that there is actually a web page being served to us. So again, we presented with 2 choices. We're narrowing it down to 1. And with this 1, now we're going to start going down paths of what do you do when you're presented with a web application. The first thing we want to do is probably run something to enumerate other pages if they exist. Because remember, this is like a puzzle. We're trying to find the needle in the haystack. So we're not presented with any menus. There's nothing I can click to like browse pages of this application. I don't know. There could be 1,000 different things after this slash that this web server is hosting. It's just not giving us the option to sort of see that. So a very common tool that we'll use is going to be Derb. But before we do that, maybe I'll just like copy this into, I'll copy this and just maybe go over to my notes real quick. Again, there's way better notes out there. This is just something I just think of it as crude, just to have. You can print and download later. But nonetheless, just again, to keep track, at least to have some evidence or a way of backtracking the things that I have done so far. So the next thing we're going to do is we're still in an enumeration phase. We're still trying to figure out what is going on, like what is this thing? So the next thing we're going to run is Derb. And again, I still have my target there. So Derb is like a directory lister. It's going to go through like a dictionary or word list of all the possibility, like, well, not all the possibilities, but a list of paths that may exist after this root directory, after this if we call it index.html. So there's probably some other paths that may exist. We don't know yet because we're still trying to figure all that out. So one of the things we can run is Derb, and that's going to sort of go through this list, if you will, to see if anything exists. And it broke because it's caching. Never mind. Anyway, so you may have to do that. Gotta have the colon. So what this is, again, I pointed it to our target, and it's essentially saying, okay, I have a word list. I'm going to try all these paths after the fact. So one of the questions is, what was the main function of Derb? Again, Derb tries to take a word list, a list of like thousands or hundreds of thousands of possible paths that websites may have that are very common. For instance, it's very common to maybe have like an admin page. So this might have /admin, right? We don't know because there's no menu telling us, but it could have that. This doesn't, but it could. So right now we're trying to figure out what are some possible paths that the website may be offering, because a lot of times there'll be hints. or there'll be other pages. Maybe there's images. Maybe there's an actual exploit that we could leverage. There's an upload directory. We just don't know. So we have to do some enumeration. But think of it as like a crawler or like a map. It's trying to build a map of the of the application. So a good point there. Trying to search for directories that aren't shown publicly. I should have just let Razo answer. So we ran derb, and right off the bat, it's basically saying like, hey, here's some things that I found. I found maybe CGI bin. This is extremely important, and a few other things, but pretty much nothing else. Maybe, but for now, again, we'll just assume that there's nothing else there. So now I know that there's a CGI bin directory, and that's what's going to hint us to what our next step should be, along with trying to find just different paths, right? So that's what we did. So we didn't really find too much, although this is like a gimme right here. We're going to come back to that. But another thing that we can do is assess the application for any vulnerabilities from the outside, right? Because we're still in enumeration. We're still trying to figure out what is the box, what's on the box, how do we get into the box, where are some possible vulnerabilities that we can leverage. So another scanner that we may want to leverage is Nikto. Whoops, before I get to that, I'm going to just copy this real quick. Add to my notes. Just to stay a little organized so I know that I did a derb. So Nikto is another enumeration tool. Essentially, it runs an assessment, if you will, on a web application to see if there are any like vulnerabilities that it can find from the outside looking in. It's going to try and enumerate maybe like the version of Apache. It's going to try and tell us to dig a little bit deeper on those versions and services, and then cross-reference that with like an internal database that says, hey, this may be vulnerable, or hey, maybe not, or hey, we found an entry here in a text file that you might want to look at, manually. So for that, we're going to use this script here, and this -c is really what is going to allow us to find our first foothold. This essentially is specifically looking at to try and look into the CGI bin. And if you remember from our derb, there was in fact a CGI bin that it appeared to find. And that's going to get us to our first exploit, if you will. So I'm just going to copy this real quick, and I'm going to come back here, and I'm going to run Nikto. And it's going to essentially just kind of like derb in the sense it's going to try and assess the application from the outside. It's going to try and look for vulnerabilities. It takes a little bit to run, but it's going to find some things that are very that are going to be really fruitful for us. Right off the bat, we can see that this application appears to be susceptible to shell shock. For those that you don't know, shell shock has been around. It's a bug that's in Bash since like late 80s, I think like 89 or something like that. So any OGs in the house, you may have heard shell shock, maybe you haven't. It's obviously been patched a million years ago, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't exist in the wild. But nonetheless, we ran Nikto. Again, it's a kind of think of it as a web application analyzing tool. It looks at what services, what's running, and then cross-references that. And it apparently found that this is most likely susceptible to a shell shock exploit. And it gives you some CVEs here. You can see it was, I think, first found in 2014. So it's been around for a while. Technically, the bug has been around since '89. It was just found to be exploited, I think, in 2014. So even in exploit years, this thing is considered ancient, even though that's what, 6, almost 7 years ago. It's still out in the wild. So again, we're getting more information about possible entry points into this box, because again, we're still enumerating. We're still trying to figure out how do I get in? What are my options? So we're trying to narrow down those options. So we know that derb found us a CGI bin. Nikto said, hey, this looks like it's susceptible to shell shock. So now that we know that it's most likely susceptible to shell shock, we got to try and figure out, well, how do we leverage shell shock? How does one gain access to a box possibly by leveraging shell shock? And just real quick, some information on shell shock. Again, it essentially allows for an RCE, remote code execution, because of a flaw in Bash, and specifically an application running the CGI, which is the CGI bin, which is basically, it's like a script handler for applications, usually like on Apache, running in a CGI bin. I don't want to get too in depth, and honestly, like this isn't something that I think is very common today, but still exists. But nonetheless, feel free, look it up. It's a known bug. It's been around for ages. But this is what we're going to leverage to get our first kind of foothold into the box. So in order to do that, we got to figure out, it's been weaponized. You can go get scripts, Python scripts, like you name it, the language, there's something written in it. We're going to leverage Metasploit, the framework, because that's just going to make our lives extremely easy. So within Metasploit, a very super basic function is just the search. So I can literally just type in like search and shell shock. And it's going to give us back whatever modules that it has. Auxiliary modules are usually like the harmless kind, the scanning kind, to tell us if something like is or isn't susceptible. I know that it is, so we're going to skip that stage. And we're just going to go straight to the actual exploit phase. And I know that this is the mod that I want to use. I know that, one, just because of experience, but also just because of the description of this mod, the CVE, and also because of, one, it's saying, hey, it's excellent. That's always good. But two, I know that this is more specific to my environment. There are different kind of ways to exploit shell shock. This is just one of them, and I know that this is kind of what's more matching my environment. I know that it's running Apache. I know that the mod CGI bin is active because we found that in the scan. So that's the one that I'm going to leverage. So if you're doing a search and you get a list, you can actually just type in the number. So it's just like use, and I'm going to use 5. And so now it's going to load that module into the Metasploit framework. For those that you don't know, Metasploit framework is a framework. It's like a repository of all these different attack modules. And it's got a lot of awesome, cool functions, but at its core, just think of it as like a repository for, again, attack modules. Probably one of the more often used tools in Kali. It is standalone. You can install it on pretty much whatever you want to install it on, but it does go within Kali. For the most part, everything we're using is default installed in Kali. So now that we've done our recon, we know our target via Nmap. We know what ports are open via Nmap. We know there's a possible shell shock exploit via Nikto, and we're going to try and leverage the Metasploit framework to essentially get us a shell. What's happening behind the scenes is quite complicated. If you just look up shell shock, and you'll maybe on like exploit DB, you may find some code examples. But essentially what this is trying to do is essentially inject or run some remote code to give us shell access because of the nature of the actual bug in Bash on this particular web server. So in Metasploit, we have to figure out like, well, okay, we're going to load this module, but now what do we do? So yes, the end goal, as Brian is saying, we do want to try and get an interpreter shell, but as you'll see, there's no shells are created equal. There's different layers or variances of shells that you'll see that give us different access, if you will. But yeah, at the end of the day, interpreter shell is what we hope for. That's kind of like at least getting a foothold onto the box, where we're literally now have gone from an outsider to an insider, going from outside looking in to actually being in on the box. So that's our first exploit, is we're literally going to try and get into the actual web server from the outside by leveraging the shell shock vulnerability. So we need to show options to see what are the options that this particular attack module offers. So there's a lot of stuff here. It may be intimidating at first, but really for this module, we really only need to focus on, I think, just two options. We need to give it a target, and we need to give it a path. And that's pretty much it. It's going to do the rest of the work for us, which is why this is can be so terrifying, because essentially, you're quote unquote script kiddies who have no idea what they're doing, but just find a YouTube video or an article and fire up Metasploit. You could do a lot of damage actually with really not knowing what you are doing, because so many things have been weaponized to make things so easy. So show options, it's also, again, I give you a little bit of information about Metasploit and some things, but it's just, there's too much to even list, or I didn't even know where to begin to try and comprehend like how to explain what this thing is to someone very new. So I just say do some research. There's tons of articles on it. I give you a little bit of information about like what to do, how to search for things, how to choose or use the attacks, things to type in to show the options, how to set some options. But you could spend months and months just on Metasploit and all the things that it can do. It's extremely powerful. But nonetheless, for us, we're gonna run with this shell shock. So we found that Metasploit does have a shell shock module, and so we're gonna hope that it can somehow give us a shell or access to our target to get us finally from outside to inside. And then our journey can begin once we're actually in the box. So the first thing we always need to set typically is our host, or remote host, which is the target. And to do anything, to set pretty much anything in Metasploit framework, you have to use the set option. So we're just going to set. We can see here our hosts is a variable, if you will. You don't have to do it capitalized. And then essentially just go our host. Make sure that you're spelling it exactly, that our hosts up there is plural, so ours has to be plural. And then we're going to give it the target address, the IP address of our target, which is 192.168.159.132 for our target, for my target, my IP address. Your IP address may be different, your target IP address may be different, but for me, this is the target address. And then you just hit enter, and now I can see that if I was to show options again, now we have a entry here next to our hosts where we didn't before. Up here, we can see that it was blank because we didn't enter one in yet. So now we have that. Now the next thing we have to do is pretty much set the target URI. This is required. We have a required path. Some things are required. You notice that everything is filled out except for our hosts, which we just filled out. Everything else is filled out except for our target URI. This is going to tell Metasploit the actual path to the CGI script. Again, remember we found the CGI bin in Derb, and then Nikto also essentially enumerated the CGI bin to tell us that inside CGI bin there's another path called test, and that's where it was able to look at this and say, yes, this is vulnerable. So we need to actually leverage this full path in Metasploit in order to get us the to run this exploit, to essentially get us shell access into the box. So we will also run set and then target URI, and then we need to give it the CGI-bin, and then we need to add the word test because that's what Nikto found. That's the full path. That's the path that's going to most likely make Metasploit happy. And from here, we're going to enter that. Now, if we show options, we should see that now we have our target URI entered. So now we've pretty much met all the requirements. We only really had to put in two things. Some modules you may need to put in more. Some may be just an IP address. But for us, we needed to put in the target IP and then the path. And so now to kick this thing off, you can hit run. I just like to type exploit. And now what it's going to try and do is it's going to try and get us onto the box. So right off the bat, I can see that this is working. It's kind of running through the steps. Started a reverse TCP handler, which means that it's connecting back to my machine on my IP over this port. The kind of congratulations message here is interpreter session has been opened. That tells us that essentially we are now on the box. So we went from outside, now we are literally inside. I am on the server. We don't know where, I don't know who I am, but I know that now I am on the actual server. So this is awesome. We went from just a spectator to just seeing that there's a web server running to just poking at the box from the outside. Now we are literally inside of the web server itself, the box, the computer, our target. So we have a interpreter shell. Interpreter is pretty awesome. It has strengths and weaknesses. Again, I'm just going to kind of cut to the chase. Again, going back to the idea that there's different levels of shells that offer you different capabilities. So maybe I can try and do like a who am I? Has no idea what that is, because really interpreter is meant to do like other attacks or other enumerations. It's not really meant to like be like to navigate through the machine. So I want to like navigate through. So I could just type in shell. Now I have more of a shell, but it kind of looks weird, and you'll see that it's kind of limited as to what my abilities are. But nonetheless, I'm trying to dig deeper and deeper to get more functionality and more freedom to do things on the box. And depending on the type of shell you have, it really kind of depends like how you may be able to move about the commands that you can kind of run versus not being able to do those things. So as we can see that the first thing I typed in is Meterpreter. It doesn't know what that is or how to run it. So I just typed in shell. Now Meterpreter went from Meterpreter to just shell. Now I have shell on the box, which means that I'm on the box with some sort of command execution, privileges. But even this shell obviously looks kind of crude. It doesn't maybe look how you're used to seeing your typical command lines like over here in Kali. So to do that, we're going to leverage Python to try and get us a more basic like PTY shell that we're probably used to seeing. So again, I can come back to my exploits or post exploitation because we've already run an exploit. We went from outside the box to inside the box, leveraging shell shock and Metasploit. So now I want to do like some sort of privesc. So the first thing we're going to do is probably we're going to run with this Python script, which is extremely common. You're going to use it quite a bit. It's probably one of the more popular shell spawn scripts that are out there. So I'm going to run this, and now you can see now I have a more traditional quote unquote shell. This would be like what you would expect after you've maybe logged into a Linux box. It might show you the path. It might show you who you are. But we're going to have a little bit more room to kind of navigate this box with this more traditional local shell versus what we were originally given through Metasploit. So we're still in Metasploit, so to say. We've just modified our shell access, if you will. So what's the one thing that I always say to do once you land in a box? You always figure out who you are. Well, we know who we are. We're www data. That doesn't surprise me because we came in through the web application. So that's a typical user associated with that. Maybe we want to know where we are. Again, no surprise here because we leveraged the CGI bin, the shell shock to gain access. So it makes sense that this is probably where it dumped us. But again, depending on the exploit, you may land in numerous places throughout, on the actual server because we're on the server now. We're on Sumo. We're inside that box. So obviously this is a boot to root. So we're not really too focused on looking for flags. We're trying to figure out how do we get root access, because right now I'm only www data, and I can guarantee you our privileges are pretty much slim to none. So I can't just run around as root. I'm not going to be able to like CD to root, which 9 times out of 10 is probably where you want to end up. That's usually where the flag is. So I have a sneaking suspicion that that's probably where we want to get to. Maybe we can try and like CD to like home or something, and then figure out like what's in there. Okay, we can CD to like figure out what's in, Sumo or whatever. So, you could just spend hours, days, just walking around the box, figuring out what's there, where you're at, all these things. But now that we're in the box, the next thing we want to do that's usually fairly common is the post exploitation or privilege privesc. So we're trying to figure out now, how do we escalate our current users' abilities to that of like root or become root? There's lots of different things that we can do, but the most common is maybe run some script or a tool that will enumerate the machine for us to save us the time of doing all these manual commands, it's good to know. But at the same time, it doesn't hurt to have it to use a script that someone else has written to help us with these things. A very common one is linenum. This was great. I used that, found similar things that we will find in less. This is one of the newer ones that I added, so I'm going to leverage this, but less, or AKA Linux exploit suggester, does exactly what it suggests that it does. It will essentially try to enumerate the Linux box that you are on from the inside to tell us things that may give us options or hints or ideas on ways we could probably escalate our privileges, or even tell us actual exploits that exist on the box, because it's going to enumerate like the kernel and the version and the OS. That it's going to try and enumerate everything that it possibly can, and then tell us possibly what exploits. Just like Nikto. Nikto from the outside said, hey, we think this thing is susceptible to shell shock. Les is going to run inside and say, hey, we think this thing maybe is susceptible to this because of this outdated version of something. So I'm gonna grab this, and now this is a script we're gonna have to get. So hopefully we have the ability to run wget or curl or some way to reach out to a remote place to download a script. Now, a lot of scripts are on GitHub. So pretty much for any type of attack or enumeration you may be looking for, you'll find some original ones, maybe some forked ones. This is extremely common. It's been around for ages. It's probably one of like the top 5 enumeration tools that you'll use, equal to or whatever to linenum. These two, they're not here out of coincidence. They're here because these are probably the 2 most used enumeration tools once you're on a box that are out there. You may find some other ones awesome. Feel free to share, but I've had like almost 100% success between one of these 2. That once I land on a box, I'm able to then enumerate that box. So we got to get it right. So I copied it. I'm going to paste this, and we're going to see if we can grab it just from where we currently are. And you can see here that permission is denied. And sometimes that's kind of common. It's kind of a roadblock, but what is very common is that you can go to like a temp directory and then run the same command and then have luck, just because of the nature of, again, who you are, where you are. All these things matter. And as you do more and more of these boxes, you're just going to start picking up habits. You might wonder, well, how did you know to go to temp? Well, I knew that because I've been doing this forever. It's just one of these things that you kind of pick up. There's no like rule. It's just one thing that you notice, that certain directories allow files to be written to them and some don't. And this is just kind of one of those cases. So this is one of the things that you'll pick up on. You land in a box, you don't know who you are, you type in some commands, you kind of figure out where you are and who you are. Now you're going to start trying to enumerate the box. Maybe you can't grab a script, and that's when you're going to have to manually type out a ton of different commands to try and enumerate this box to find some vulnerabilities. But if we can find a way to reach outside in, we're going to do that, because it's going to make our lives a whole lot easier. And it just so turns out in this instance that from home or inside of the Sumo directory, I can't grab things. It won't let me write to the disk. But in the temp directory, which is where you can call it like a hack in itself, the temp directory does usually allow things to be written to it. So now you'll find that if I try and run the wget in here, it actually worked. I can see that I did save the enumeration file, less the Linux exploit suggester. So now I can see in here that I do have the file. It downloaded the file. I'm in the temp directory. Now I can use this. Well, in Linux, as you know, to run a script, there's a few little things we need to kind of do. We need to chmod it first to make it executable, and then we need to run the script. So very, 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 very important. We have to run the script that we just got. In order to do that, we have to chmod it, or essentially change some of the way that we can access the script. So for that, we're going to run the +X and then the script name. And now what that's going to allow us to do is run the script as like a executable, if you will. So now I can // and then run it. And now once I run it, it's going to run a bunch of different queries on the box that's going to try and enumerate the box from the inside and then tell us what are some things we can try and leverage to gain root access. Because right now there's still www data. We are in the box, but we're not root. And the goal is to boot to root, is to get root access. So if we scroll up here, I generally start at the top and work my way down. And again, to save us hours and hours of countless try and fail, we're going to leverage Dirty Cow. Dirty Cow, again, for those old schoolers in the room, may have heard of it a million times. Essentially, it's called that because it's dirty copy on write. Essentially, it's a race condition at the kernel level, and If it's done correctly, it allows privilege escalation. That's pretty much as far as I'll get to it. Look it up. You'll find tons of boxes that are still vulnerable to this. You'll find lots of vulnerable hub boxes or hack the boxes that leverage this as part of privilege escalation. Again, that's sort of like the phase 3. The phase 1 was enumeration. We enumerated the box. We found out some ports that are open. The next thing we did was exploit. We leveraged shell shock and Metasploit exploit to get us into the box. Now we're kind of onto the third phase of post exploitation, which is either some form of persistence or gaining root access, or both, depending on what it is we find. So Dirty Cow, again, this enumerated, this basically said, hey, this is running this version of Ubuntu, or this is running this version of kernel. And we know that these old versions are susceptible to possibly these types of exploits. I tried a few of these. They were unsuccessful, or they didn't compile correctly. I'll show you in a minute what I mean by compile. But nonetheless, this is a tool that's pretty awesome. And it's basically saying, hey, these are the things we think may work or that the box may be susceptible to. There's quite a few of them, but I'm going to stick with just plain old Dirty Cow. One of the first things that it brought up. So for Dirty Cow, again, if you just do any research on it, you will find, I think I put the, yeah, here we go. So essentially, we're going to grab this file because we know wget works in the temp directory, so we're going to run with that. And this is essentially what it's doing. This is literally what Dirty Cow does. To kind of exploit that race condition. There's a little bit of a caveat, or not caveat, but there's some prep work we got to do. First, we got to get the script, which we'll do here in a second. The next thing we have to do is compile the script locally to run. And then we got to feed it like an argument. In this case, we're going to feed it a password. And what this is going to do is this is going to sort of exploit that race condition that is going to give us a user with root privileges that we can sudo up to or log in as. And in order to do that, we have to have a password. So whatever, we're going to set a password, and it's going to create a user on the box with that password with root privileges. It just so happens that the gentleman or woman that created this has a sense of humor. Our username is going to be Firefart, which I think is hilarious. And the password is going to be whatever we set. So real quick, Brian mentioned, hey, what kind of defense mechanism could we put in place to not allow Enum to work? Well, I don't know about getting it not to work, but obviously if the machine is hardened, then technically, even if someone was to run it, there shouldn't be any vulns that it finds. So if the Linux box is hardened and up to date, well patched, which is a whole separate conversation, it shouldn't. Maybe it finds a false positive. It might think that it's susceptible to that, but it isn't. So it really is more of, don't think of a deterrent. Think of the first principle of security is patch. It should be secure, so that even if someone, and it's kind of counterintuitive, were to get onto it, that it's secure enough that you couldn't run anything to enumerate. Obviously, you could do some other things of like making certain directories not writable, or again, I think if the security measures are in place where it's patched enough, up to date, then it shouldn't find anything. It's because really it's enumerating just vulnerabilities that it knows. If the box is up to date and patched, it shouldn't be finding any vulnerabilities. Or it might say this version is susceptible to this, but if it's patched, it wouldn't work. So even if someone was to try and run some script, it would fail, because really it's just enumerating the box and saying, hey, from the information that I'm able to find, the version, the kernel, the version of the OS, all that stuff, these are things. It's not telling you any of these are going to work. It's just saying that from the information that I found internally, these are things that may be susceptible to these things. But I think at the end of the day, it should really go back to hardening. So this list is very short or doesn't come back with anything, or whatever it comes back to, it's really just saying, hey, there's a known exploit to this version of something. But if this box is patched, again, even if I was to try and run something, I wouldn't be able to. I think, again, there's that fine line of if you lock it down too much, the users don't have any ability to do anything. So you can't make it to where you can't save anything to the file system. Or maybe you do. Maybe you only allow root privileges just like this, but don't allow any other user actually to have access or to be able to write to the disk. That could help. But at the end of the day, the box should be patched and up to date. So yeah, so again, going back to the dirty cow, we're going to leverage this. Thankfully, we're going to download the script, so you don't have to try and type any of this stuff out. If you didn't, you may have to. You may actually have to type all of this out because you can't do a wget and reach from the outside in and save something. But nonetheless, luckily for us, we're going to be able to do that. So the first thing we're going to do is grab the script. And so we have, oops, if I go back here, we have this. I can just essentially, this is the raw, right? So I can literally just wget and then this, and it will bring this into the temp directory. For those who don't know wget, it just basically it's like a download function. It reaches out somewhere and then pulls it in. So we're saying get this file as this name. And so because we're in temp and temp is allowing us to do this and write to the disk, we can see now that we were able to go out and get this. Ignore the other things. That's just because this has been already exploited a million times. But we can see our less that we had before, and we can see the dirty C, which is the dirty cow file .c. So because it's a .c, it needs to be again compiled, which again it gave us explicit instructions on what to do, how to compile this. So we're going to run this command that compiles it, and then think of like the chmod. Now it lets us run it, and then we're going to run it, but we're going to feed it the argument of whatever of the password that we're going to log in with as Firefart. And Firefart is now will have root access by the nature of the way this exploit, by the way this race condition works that we're exploiting. And this script is going to do everything for us. Again, which is terrifying that you really don't need to know what you're doing. Just download a script and follow the instructions and run it. And next thing you know, you're root. As long as the box is susceptible to this type of exploit. So for this, I'm just going to copy this to make life easy. And then we can essentially just, we haven't changed anything yet. So that's still the file we're going to run it as. And we're just going to paste this. And it's essentially saying that we're going to compile this. That's just, think of it, we're going to compile it. So now that it's done, so now I can ls and I can see that it's been compiled now. So now what it's telling us to do is, you notice here we don't have the .c anymore because it's compiled it down from the .c to the actual like an executable, if you will. So now we're just going to do this. We're just going to run it, and then we're going to feed in the password that we want to set for the new super user, if you will, quote unquote Firefart. That's the name of the user that will be created once this runs. So we know that we essentially just do /dirty, and then we're going to do, I'm just going to put in the word password. So I know that that's the password that I'm setting. If it's confusing, it's just I'm using the word password for the password. The word password, this field is what you want the password to be. I want the password to be password because it's super easy to remember. You can put anything you want here, and it will make that the password. So once I run this, we're gonna give it a minute. We can it's gonna kind of tell us what it's doing. It tells us right here that it owned it, that we were able to get essentially root bin bash. We're gonna let it finish, and then once it finishes, we can then sudo up or change users to Firefart, which is the awesome name that this exploit has given us. And then we'll log in with the word password because that's the password that I fed into the script. And essentially what it's doing behind the scenes is getting us that root access as the user Firefart with the password being password. So we're gonna let this sit here for another a few more seconds, and it will finish and give us a prompt that we can use to essentially sudo up or change to log in as Firefart. Now, once I do that, I'm already here, I can sudo up, or technically I could SSH in from the outside. That doesn't make any sense because we're already in the box, but technically it is creating a user called Firefart with the password. So technically, that's kind of our persistence. So we're sort of killing two birds with one stone. We've done some privilege escalation to get root, but also part of the post-exploitation process is to make sure we try and get some sort of persistence, right? We want to be able to come in and out of this box whenever we want. We want to essentially be root. We want, to just come and go as we please, to exploit this thing however we want. So now that we literally have a user created with root privileges, as long as that box is running and no one removes this user, I could come and go as I please. I could literally from Kali, I could SSH into it with the Firefart user with password, all of that good stuff. But we're already in the box, so it doesn't make any sense for us to SSH. But we can see here that it finished. It kind of gives you some sort of checks, if you will, to make sure that what to do after the fact. But for now, again, we can see that we're www data, reconfirmed here. Now I'm going to sudo up into Firefart, which was the user that was created from the dirty cal exploit, because this is an old version, this is an old kernel that allows this exploit to take place. And then it's gonna ask us the password. Well, we set the password as password. And now we are Firefart. So, okay, that's cool. Who am I? Well, we're Firefart. We know that. But now we have root users or root privileges. Now I'm not getting permission denied anymore to get to that root directory. I am essentially sort of root. I can do everything that root can do. So with that, now I can get to the root directory. It's not complaining about permissions because it thinks I'm root. And now once I'm in there, I can look around and I can see, sure enough, I have a root.txt. And once I cat this, I can see that that's the flag. Essentially game over. That is the boot to root. We, in essence, captured the flag, but in this instance, it was really just the boot flag or the root flag from the whole kind of boot to root challenge. So that's basically it for this. A very few steps. I did my best to sort of hopefully explain things as I'm going, but with that said, this completes this box. We are now, hey, I've captured the root flag. We are now root, and that's essentially it for Sumo. So I'll end with that.